Greetings, everyone. As you're entering the webinar, the Zoom call, the Liminal extravaganza, I guess, if you want to call it that. I'm going to let everybody kind of file in. We've got everybody who's joining the call right now. It's really exciting to see a lot of people who are interested in hearing what's going on at Liminal and what's coming up. And we've got some great guests that are participating with us. So hopefully it'll be an informative and interesting call for the next hour. We've got about 50 of the people are in. We're expecting a little over 100 people on the call. So hang in there while we bring everybody in. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names. It's exciting to see people who have been following our little journey here over the years, and most recently with the Liminal program. We're getting there, just about there. I do feel a little bad in that we aren't doing a tasting with all of you, and that the panelists have the opportunity to try the wines, but this seemed like the best way, great opportunity for us to kind of talk about what's going on, introduce the 21 vintage. So this is Marty's attempt at stalling. It's not always perfect, but it is allowing us to get everybody to join the call. Well, we're 3/4 of the way in, so let's just go ahead and get started. Just so people can won't have to wait much longer. I think people can catch up once we get going. I'm Marty. I'm Marty Taucher. I'm the managing partner at Avinia and Liminal. Chris Peterson is with us. He is my partner and our winemaker for all of our various projects. Joining us today is the two WeatherEye partners, Cam Myhrvold, who's the owner, managing partner, and the kind of the visionary behind the WeatherEye vineyard, and then Ryan Johnson, who, like Chris, has to implement all the crazy ideas that that we come up with and talk us off ledges every once in a while. It's great to have Ryan and Cam with us, and of course, we're super excited to have our special guest, Sean Sullivan, joining us from Northwest Wine Report. Sean, it's great to have you with us, and then running the keyboards behind the Liminal logo there, that would be Allison, is helping us out on the back end. And so that's everybody on the call. What I wanted to do today, and I just want to kind of take you through the outline briefly. What we're going to do is we're going to have Chris do a little bit of an update on and a preview of the 2021 vintage, which is now all in bottle and sitting there waiting for the releases. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Sean's had a chance to try the wine, so we're going to talk a little bit about the 21 vintage in general, and then I'm going to ask Chris to weigh in on kind of what we have in barrel and what will be bottled next year in the 22 vintage. And then we're going to switch a little bit up to talk about, we're 4 years into this project for us. It's a little longer for Cam, but we want to talk a little bit about what has changed, and what have we learned, what's new, what's the past and the future of what WeatherEye and Liminal look like? What are the next steps? So we're going to go through that. And then after we get through that discussion, we're actually going to try the 4 wines that we're going to release this fall. And it'll be fun to get the first impressions from Cam and Ryan, as well as Chris's kind of description of what the wines are to him and to us. And then have Sean's also going to weigh in on that. And then once we go through the 4 wines we're going to release this fall, we're going to tell you about how we're updating the allocation process and how that's going to move forward from here out. So with that being said, Chris, why don't you start us off with a little discussion about the 21 vintage?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming to this. We're trying to use Zoom a lot more sparingly, I think, these days, but I think it's a great way to talk about this project that we've been working on for a few years. 2021 is, I think, you'll see the wines are really strong. And the reason for that is we had, a really warm year. And towards the end of harvest, we realized, or towards the end of the growing season, we realized there was maybe the fruit wasn't as, there wasn't as much yield as we thought. So we had historically low yields, sometimes 20 or 30% lower than normal. And so, the short answer in 2021 is that they're great wines and there's just not enough of them. So we were down quite a bit, but I think across the board, wines are just showing outstandingly.
Yeah, I would agree with Chris. From what I've seen that's crossed my desk so far, it's still obviously early on for the 21 vintage, but the big markers are warm year, low crop, very high quality on the wines. I think very consumer friendly, approachable wines out of the gate. That said, I expect they'll have good ageability as well, but this is a strong vintage for Washington.
Yeah, the concentration is intense and tasting versus, kind of surrounding vintages. That's what really stands out. A lot of structure, a lot of concentration, really dark colors. I think the wines have changed in the bottle just in the short amount of time in bottle too, compared to when we were tasting them in barrels, for the better. So I'm really excited as we just start releasing these wines.
Brian, what are your thoughts on the 21 vintage? I mean, as a grower, as of myself, we've got our little estate vineyard, first year in, first vintage. Everybody says, yeah, our yields are down about 30%. I go, I can't do that. You can't do that. You got to find more fruit to pick. I've got bills to pay. And so what was the deal? Why was 21 lighter than normal? Just physiologically screwed up or weird year? What?
I'll say this first. Any grower that made it through 2020, 2021, and 2022 should get free therapy for life. Or in my case, maybe some free liminal wine for life. That was an interesting string of vintages for us. It just covered the gamut of interesting things to experience and to work through and challenges to overcome. But in 2021, really, there was a theme. It would be heat dome. And really, there's a few interesting things that happened through the course of the year. We had some decent winter moisture, and then we had the wildflowers sprung up, and we're thinking, okay, it could be one of those normal type of vintages for us. And then the winds started kicking up, and so we had a very windy spring, and it dried out the soils. And then the heat started to come on, and at one point, I think it was National Weather Service said that this was the worst drought since 1977. So it was very warm, very windy, very dry. And then first week of summer, basically the oven kicked on, and we had some historic heat events. We had, I think it was 120 degrees out at Hanford. Red Mountain was 118. WeatherEye, we had back-to-back 111 days, degree days. So that was kind of interesting to deal with. During the course of that first heat dome, and by the way, they said that was a one in a millennium event. And then we had two more heat domes later that summer. There was one point where it was above 100 degrees and we had wind gusts of 40 miles an hour, and we had sustained 20-mile-an-hour winds. So you can imagine being in that and doing your irrigation work. The crew had already been home, for hours, but some poor sap had to go and check on things because the coyotes like to chew on the drip tube. So it was one of those things you really felt like you were standing in front of an industrial hair dryer on full blast. It was pretty unusual. And so you can imagine if I was feeling that way, well, the fruit was under a similar experience, except we were coddling them as best we could with irrigation. And then what that in turn on the management side is that if it was going to be under a lot of stress, then we felt like we had to step up our nutrition game as well and stay on top of canopy management and try to keep things in as balance as we could. But for the course of the summer, they were exposed to some pretty warm temperatures, and when you see that, like that constant baking heat, you see a corresponding effect on cluster size and weight, but also on berry size and weight. And so you get really concentrated fruit. If you don't kill it off, you can get some pretty special stuff. And I think for the most part, when we designed WeatherEye, we took into account that we could get some pretty hot vintages, some pretty cold vintages. And so our spacing, our training systems, the clones and the varieties that we chose were kind of in anticipation of some of those more extreme vintages. So overall, I mean, it's really cool to taste these wines and feel somewhat vindicated. But it was a real challenge to get through it. I'm thankful for the crew that we had. They did a great job. And the wines, I think, turned out pretty singular considering everything that we faced.
Terrific. Thanks, Ryan.
You bet.
And just for those of you who are watching and listening in, we do have the opportunity for you to send us questions. We're going to address the question. I'm going to be following that, and I will probably try to weave the questions in as we go through the conversation. So feel free to use that chat box that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen to type in questions, and we'll be monitoring those. Thanks for that, Ryan. Let's kind of think about the 22 for a second, the wines that are coming up, the wines in barrel, Chris. You've had a chance to try some of these as part of your blending process. What's your initial impression for 22?
Yeah, it really kind of follows what Ryan said. It's like in 21, we're like, how can we get this fruit off fast enough? It's ripening and early with really warm weather. The great thing about WeatherEye is it's really good. This whole vineyard, I think because of Ryan's efforts, is really good at retaining acidity. So that really helped. In 2022, we had a late bud break due to some, a lot of snow and moisture over the winter. So we had this late bud break, and it kind of just never caught up. And so we had a lot of extra hang time, and I know our guys in the cellar were just like twiddling their thumbs for the first 2 weeks of September, asking me when we were going to get fruit, and everything was just late. Sauvignon Blanc was past the middle of September. It was really weird, and we're like, oh gosh, we're going to need a perfect October to pull this off, or else what's going to happen with this fruit? Is it going to get ripe? And as many of you recall, in Seattle, as well as over Eastern Washington, we got just that. We got the perfect October. We were picking WeatherEye until probably October 20th, which is by far the latest, probably some of the latest Ryan's ever picked. And we picked actually a couple times into November at Avenia, and for the first time since 2011. But because we got all that hang time, the fruit really matured evenly. We got really moderate sugar levels and great. The color is like remarkable this year in 2022. And the structure is strong. The yields are a little bit more, they're a little bit higher than 2021, but well in the sweet spot. I think that could be a really special vintage.
Yeah, I would concur. It's if you think about it, so how Ryan touched on how different and challenging a series of years it's been. So the first fruit this harvest sounds like it's going to start coming in on Thursday. I've heard from a few different growers. And if you compare that with a year prior in 2022, I was out in Walla Walla the third week of September. No one had picked a single grape at that point in time. So like a full month plus later, and just very, very different vintages, and certainly keeping growers on their toes. But the white wines that I've seen from 2022 have been spectacular. They've got excellent concentration and a really nice, lively sense of acidity. And from everything I've heard in barrel tasting on the reds, it has a chance, as Chris said, to be a very special vintage for Washington.
Cool. Well, it's kind of fun to kind of, part of the things I wanted to explore and have a conversation with, and try to get Cam to kind of weigh in sort of expectations. We've been working with the fruit for, this will be our fourth vintage, I think, or fifth coming up in 23, our fifth vintage, right? And so over the last 4 years, when we first kind of made a commitment to try to have a nice range of wines from this vineyard, what are the things that have surprised us about the vineyard? Everything, as we all know, being former Microsoft employees, every plan goes according to the way it is on the PowerPoint presentation. So really, there's probably no surprises in this vineyard or anything like that. But, it might be interesting to let people know that maybe there's a little humanity behind all this, and that things we've learned are really valuable, and it allows us to inform where we're going in the future. So I don't know, Cam and Ryan, what have you kind of learned? What's exciting about the vineyard, and how has it met your expectations?
Well, I'll take a stab at that, and then I'll defer to Ryan. It's been a wonderful experience. I think that's primarily because it's a pretty special site, and because of all of the blood, sweat, and tears Ryan and crew have put into growing fruit. I am super impressed by the results we've had with our Rhones. We are now planting more Bordeaux. For a long time, we've had a very small amount of Bordeaux, which of course Liminal gets most of it. So very pleased with how that has gone. I've been, kind of amazed at the quality of the whites. That was unexpected. I really did not expect that, and yet I think some of the most exciting wines being produced today off of WeatherEye are in fact white wines, and that is super cool, right? I mean, it's not called White Mountain. Yet the whites have been super great and thrilling. That would be one thing that I'd say. The other, of course, is what you're joking about, Marty, and that is that Mother Nature is Mother Nature, and she giveth and she taketh away. There's a block, La Flecha, we call it, a large block of bush-trained Grenache, and I think in 18 and 19 we took 6 tons of fruit off of that block, and definitely one of our larger blocks. And in 20 and 21 we took 2.8. So down 30%. Hey, I'd be pretty thrilled with down 30%. Down more than half. Yeah, that's something. And of course, you do get the reverse too. In 2022, we got an abundance of yield, and so it has been astonishing what Mother Nature has given us. Very pleased with the quality, but the yields are up and down. They're down, they're up, with no rhyme and reason. And obviously, when you're running a business, as you are, Marty, or as we are trying to do, that makes it super challenging.
Have you guys found when you started working up there, you worked on the south slope and the north slope, and you've done a lot of work on the north slope on kind of the leeward side of the mountain. Are you finding the philosophy and the planting strategy probably different clones or different varietals? Are you finding the differences of the wines coming out of those two different sides of the mountain what you expected, or are they meeting your expectations, or what are you learning from?
So I want Ryan to go into that in more detail. I would say that I've been surprised. We have the rockiest piece of ground we farm called the Terraces. We grow Grenache there, and yet it produces this marvelous, pretty feminine style wine. Now, clearly, some of that's going to be, dictated by the winemaker that we sell it to, but it's counterintuitive, to say the least. But also, I think super cool. We love the north aspect. Red Mountain is a hot site. Getting out of the sun a little earlier each day, taking advantage of the altitude and having slightly lower temperatures. It's been great, and certainly when we planted up there were naysayers that said, hey, you're going to lose a lot of vines, you are going to freeze out every year. And of course, we've discovered that what we expected was the temperature inversion has actually saved us many times. So I think, Ryan, it's accurate to say, out of all our plantings, and we've got 32 acres planted now, not all producing, but planted, I don't think we've lost a single vine to frost. Is that right, Ryan?
We've lost buds, and for example, this year we lost in our Syrah blocks, occasional Syrah blocks on the north side, we lost some primary buds. I think a lot of vineyards this year saw that in Syrah. We're not unique in that regard. As Cam mentioned, I mean, the temperature inversion. So case in point, and we've mentioned this before. There was one December in particular where, so I was monitoring. There was a hard frost alert, and so I was monitoring the temperatures that evening. And there's a weather station, a W2 weather station down below on the flats of Red Mountain. And then we have one on our upper north side. And there was a 12-degree delta. We were that much warmer being in that inversion layer. And so that was kind of a nice, pleasant surprise to see that it was that drastic. Now, conversely, when we have one of those Arctic air masses come down and it's just rushing at us like a freight train, the air is mixed up. We're up there just fully naked and exposed. And that can be a bit nerve-wracking. And those events used to be not quite so common, but we've had a few the last few vintages actually, and we always dodge any real damage. But it's also through the design of the vineyard. We have cold air drainage pathways. We're not putting really low train stuff in where we think it's going to frost off. But certainly being up at that elevation pays dividends. And so much of what we've done, doing our homework, we'll plant certain training systems and different varieties. Cold sensitive varieties aren't going to go in the coldest spots of the vineyard. And but so far, I think that has been a cool advantage for us in just seeing what the temperature difference can be up there, as long as we're not taking it in the shorts on those Arctic air mass events.
Right. Hey, Chris, we've got a north slope Syrah and we've got a south slope Syrah with our high canyon stuff. Your feeling on the differentiation as you've had a chance to work with 4 vintages now?
Yeah, that has been interesting and also a little surprising. We think, oh, it's the north side, we're just going to get more hang time and more acid. The first red, I believe, maybe along with the Merlot, which is on the north side, is that we always pick that north side Syrah, 5 to 7 days earlier than the Red Mountain side. It's a higher elevation, but I don't think it's appreciably lower yields, but we usually pick that a little earlier and a higher brick, so that ripens faster. And we get some Cabernet and Merlot and Cabernet Franc all from that north side that goes into our Bordeaux blend. So shout out to the spring webinar, or maybe we can do it in person, but the Bordeaux varieties that we have on the north side too are, very good, not lean, not green, very ripe. And but in both cases, the Syrah and the Cabernet that we get from both sides, they're very different. Very different in quality. Yeah.
And if you were to generalize, we have people who say, well, the Block 16 Syrah kind of feels to me like this. It kind of represents this sort of nature. And then the High Canyon Syrah kind of represents a different nature. I mean, when you're tasting the two wines side by side, they're really unique and different. And how would you characterize that as a winemaker? And I don't know, Sean, if you've had a chance to do side by side comparisons for the two, but what's your feeling? Or am I overgeneralizing something that really can't be overgeneralized?
No, I think over the years, with the first year, we tried 4 different blocks. And then, just for reality's sake, we tried to narrow it down to do, 2 single vineyard blocks. And and as we've gone through it the multiple years, they did have quite a different personality. And so now we're making winemaking decisions to kind of reflect and differentiate those personalities. So the High Canyon Syrah is very dark in color, very dark in flavors too, a lot of black fruits, and a lot of floral notes. It is planted right next to lavender, so I don't know if that has something to do with it, but it's a really pretty wine, but also really intense black fruits. And that kind of reminded me of Côte Rôtie a little bit. So I thought for me, it kind of made a logical sense to try a Viognier co-ferment with that. So that's what we do there, 3 to 4% Viognier co-ferment in that wine, fermented in concrete. The Block 16 has always been wilder. And because we only made a small amount of it, for years, we didn't have a concrete tank small enough. So we've been doing it in stainless steel. This one was done in stainless steel fermenter, open top fermenter, like a lot of our wines. And it just has this more wild, sauvage kind of note, wild herbs. And so we've been trying to kind of show that in, I use a different new barrel in there. It's about 25% new. Use a different barrel that kind of accentuates that, a little more, stems and whole cluster in the fermentation. And actually last year we bought a couple small concrete tanks with the express purpose of these small, certain really small blocks can still get that concrete fermentation, which I think has been a game changer for a lot of the liminal wines. So yeah, 16 kind of, you know, sauvage, wind swept, and I think it's the High Canyon is more kind of sleek and sophisticated.
Chris, talk about you mentioned adding in some stems into the wine. What you're kind of hoping to achieve with that particular wine?
Well, with the block, we do that to a certain extent with most of our own wines. I just kind of associate kind of stems with having a little more savory notes, a little more, not rougher tannins, but, you know, kind of more tannins that kind of feel a little wilder than where in Cabernet you're looking for just really streamlined tannins. This can be kind of more country French style, you know, and kind of that savory. And the way we do that traditionally has been kind of, you know, adding stems back in, because we have a system, our destemming system has 2 points so we hand sort twice. And I really like the hand sorting for, you know, leaves and for bad bunches and that kind of thing. So it gets destemmed as part of that, and then we can add those stems back. The other way we've done it, and I really like this too, we're starting to do it, is maybe 20 to 25%, and we do foot stomp, which in the first few years is me, and now I'm like, you know, an intern can really earn their keep doing that, and especially towards the end of the season when the grapes get a lot colder.
Yeah.
You one of the things I think about the 2018 wines, the first vintages, and talking to you about those, was you'd said they're looking at their own varieties, that you didn't put much new oak on those, and saying, like, I didn't really know what I had, so I wanted to kind of look as you know, kind of an unblemished and neutral perspective as I had. It sounds like as the last 5 years has gone along, you're kind of adjusting that and putting a little more new wood on some of the wines. What does that look like?
Yes, especially in the Cabernet, of course, started in 2019, and that's probably a different question. The Grenache blend still gets no new oak. We've actually been able to get it into mostly bigger format barrels, and we're doing a portion of the élevage, a lot of the fermentation, and a portion of the élevage in concrete as well. So that's been something that we've changed and evolved a little bit. The new oak, we've played around with it. We don't get enough of these, you know, this fruit to really. We want to release it all. There's only enough for, you know, we want it all as wine. So it's been a slow progression of experimentation, but definitely the one new barrel that goes into the High Canyon Syrah is a very kind of high-end, sleek type of barrel. It's very sophisticated. And then the one that we get for the Block 16 has more, I guess they're both Burgundy cooperages, but this one is definitely known for, it's just a medium toast, sometimes medium plus. And it really just brings some mouthfeel, some structure, and doesn't make it kind of New World oaky. And so what we do then also is, if it is, you know, in any given year, it's a little aggressive or using the whole barrel is too much, we'll trial in and use just a partial of that new barrel we'll just do blending trials to see exactly how much is the right amount for that wine in that year.
Yeah, Ryan, you raised your hand. You had a thought on this.
Well, I hope it doesn't get me in trouble. The reason he's got the interns doing the foot stomping is because we send him such clean fruit, they're standing around twiddling their thumbs. And he's like, dang it, Marty's not going to like this. He's paying these guys and they're standing around. So that's
Get him in there. Come on.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
It's a true story. It's a true story. The WeatherEye fruit comes in, and there's nothing in there but perfect clusters, and they sort out any of the, you know, anything that's not going to look just magazine ready when it comes in. It's true, and it makes us excited and inspired when the fruit comes in, honestly.
Yeah, you could probably cut a little labor cost in the vineyard there, Cam, and we'd be fine with a little messier fruit if you really wanted it.
Well, we made a decision, not to go on this, but we did make a decision. This is Ryan's idea, to pay people by the hour when they're picking as opposed to the pound.
By the time, yeah.
Right. And that way it's easier to say, look, take your time, make sure the fruit looks great, and the fruit always looks great. There are stories of winemakers is like, I didn't know what to expect, so I hired, I rented a sorter and I'm not using it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, like you said, are the wines that we're creating from those two different sides of the vineyard meeting your guys' expectations in terms of what you thought you were going to accomplish? I mean, we basically got that whole block 16 and we got the whole High Canyon. I mean, we're kind of greedy when it comes to these blocks. So are you guys think we've met your expectations? Any feedback on that?
I love the fact that the wines are so different and speak to, the very place within the vineyard that they were grown. The High Canyon is always super classy, elegant wine, ready right from the start, beauty. And, block 16 is a little bit more backward, brooding beast, but such potential there. Such potential. I tend to buy the block 16, as you know, because I put it in my cellar and I know I'm going to be rewarded with patience for doing so. But they're both beautiful wines. So I would say we're very happy.
Cool.
We are happy with everything Chris does, basically. But I mean, those two in particular, absolutely.
Cool. And you're planning more Rhone varietal or more Bordeaux varietals, more Rhones, anything? Just kind of steadies as she goes. You're going to be planted out to all 300 acres in 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Okay, so no. It's a big piece of property. It's 360 acres. And Ryan and I, debate
330 to go.
whether Ryan and I debate whether we're going to get 50 or 60 or 70 acres of that planted. There's simply too many steep slopes that can't be planted. There's too many areas that aren't that steep, but they have no soil. And it turns out you can do a lot of things with grapes, but you do need some soil. So Ryan is better than I. I would hope that we could get to 80 acres on the vineyard. He would probably give you a smaller number, and he's probably more accurate.
Cool.
We must have been a little sneaky this spring because we planted some more acreage and now we're up to 37 planted. And as Cam is saying, I mean, we've got that entire upper slope area on both sides. We could terrace. I mean, there's so many options, and so we're looking at the results that we've seen so far. We're weighing that against, how much energy do we have left in our bodies and our minds? And then we went and we hired these young, brilliant assistants who I know are going to push us. And I would say that there's going to be some great things ahead in the future. And I've got a piece of wood here. I just knocked on that. But it was important for us to start expanding the Bordeaux program. But every time we get up in those terraces or even the mountain monster, which looks like that burial ground on top, which literally doesn't have any soil, but we were able to overcome that challenge. I mean, it's just the sky's the limit. So it's an ongoing art project for us. It's a lot of fun.
Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate all that conversation about where we're going. But I really want to turn our attention now to try the 4 wines we're going to release. We've split our allocation process going forward. We're going to do 4 wines in the fall, and we're going to do the balance in the spring. And this fall, we're going to release 4 wines. We're going to release the entire High Canyon series, which is the Grenache, the High Canyon Syrah, and the Viognier. And we're also going to release the GSM, which has been renamed. And so when we get to that wine, I want to tell you a little bit about the name and sort of where we came up with the new name for the GSM. So with that, Allison, you want to throw up the slide? The first wine in our little selection today is the Viognier, the white wine. And as you can see here, 100% Viognier. We did 41 cases, priced at $51, and Chris, what's your thoughts on this wine?
This kind of brings us back to what Cam was saying about the quality of white wine up there. This is a grape associated with a cooler part of the Rhone Valley, very far up north, and known to kind of keep its acidity in good years and keep its freshness. And we planted on they go and planted on Red Mountain. I don't know how much Viognier is up there, but it's pretty high up that Red Mountain slope, and it's the best Viognier I can think of from Washington. It has beautiful freshness of acidity, a lot of concentration. We just we get the fruit in, we put it in the press, and we have to press it really slowly because the skins are kind of thick, and it's hard. You have to coax that juice out to get much yield out of there. And then we ferment it with native yeast in about 2 new barrels usually. Sometimes a couple times we've got a third, or not new, I said new, used barrels, just old, completely neutral, kind of thick state barrels. And we age it there, and we stir it, the lees just a few times and maybe it goes through 50% malolactic fermentation, if that. And we figure out when to stop that just by taste. And I just think it's a really beautiful expression of this grape. And one thing this grape is very susceptible to is overripeness, where you kind of get a bunch of peach or sometimes like banana, and that's just something that doesn't appeal to me. So I think the acidity and the balance on this is just right on. The varietal typicity, it smells like Viognier, and I think this is our best one yet. I think the thing about Viognier too is it's difficult to grow, and it's difficult to kind of make it, and you're always kind of trying to work together to get it, picked at the right time and all that. And so I bet, Ryan has learned about this grape in the past few years, and I just think we're knocking it out of the park on this wine.
Yeah, I always say with Viognier that it's the best of wines and it's the worst of wines. It's like when it is on, it is so gorgeous and so lovely. And as Chris talked about, it has this tendency towards overripeness when it just gets this kind of Jolly Rancher and very boozy thing. And this is a beautiful, beautiful example of this variety where there is impressive fruit intensity and concentration there, still lovely balance and a sense of vibrancy to it. And it speaks to both Ryan's meticulous farming of this site and also with Viognier. I think the critical thing of that picking decision, and Chris and Ryan talking about that and making sure they get that right, because that, some years, especially 21, right, hot, that window when you can pick this variety is and get it right, it's going to be pretty narrow. But it's a beautiful version of Viognier.
Cool.
Yeah, and that's something worth pointing out too. With a lot of our vineyards and a lot of the relationships, some of these guys have a lot, and women have just a lot of customers. You go out there and take a look, and you say, "Hey, I want to pick it next Friday." They're like, "Fine, whatever. I'll put you on the books," and that's the end of it, and you're kind of just doing it all. With Ryan, we're on the phone multiple times per week. I'm usually out there at least once a week, but we're always on the phone, and because he's not only deciding what day, he's like wondering what time of day it's going to be perfectly ripe. So we're in constant contact on that, and I think that's really made a difference in the quality of our wines.
Cool. Before we get on to the next one, we've got 3 questions. Richard, your question's pretty simple. Is the Viognier picked by hand? Yeah, everything is picked by hand in the vineyard. I don't think you're doing you don't have machines that can go up and down those hills. Is that I think I'm correct on that, right, Ryan? Yeah, all by hand.
Correct. We are the vineyard that automation forgot.
Yeah. And Adam, you had a good question here. And while we're moving on to the Grenache, which is the next wine, and so you guys can get that in your glass. Adam put in a question: given the climate change is probably not going to stop delivering heat domes anytime soon, what kind of prep are you doing for increasing temperature? Varietal and clone changes, artificial shading, anything that you're doing to adapt to a warmer world? Driving electric cars.
Well, it's part of why we are so excited about the north side and the north slope, right? Is dealing with the heat that is already abundant on Red Mountain. You know, other things I'll let Ryan give more detail, but sure, we're looking at things. There's systems people are putting in place to mist the fruit zone, canopy management, which you already managed, which you already mentioned, a variety of things we're looking at to better control that.
Part of
Brian?
part of my philosophy when we go in to put a vineyard in the ground, when we're looking to develop a site, is that for me, I take it personally that 5 or 10 years down the road, I'm not going to have any regrets about our decisions, because, you know, I'm doing everything I can for Cam, who was, you know, so faithful and supportive to basically just say, let's do what we need to do to grow the best grapes in the world. And so, you know, everything we do is very analytical and thoughtful, and look at it from multiple angles. Well, that's one of the reasons then on the south side, where we do go up a slope, and guess what? You know, there's a southwest aspect, and it's rocky and it's hot and it's windswept, and it's, you know, the sun could be beating down on it. Well, then we go higher density. So in a lot of our south facing blocks, those are meter by meter echelon trains. So it's on a single stake. So, you know, you can imagine these clusters being down low. For those that aren't familiar with the echelon system, if you think Hermitage, or, you know, where you have a short trunk, and then you have potentially 5 feet of canopy. We have a lot of shade on those clusters, and we cool down the vineyard floor because of the vine to vine shading. And then we're also very, very particular in how we irrigate. And so we want to increase the humidity in certain ways. If we see, you know, the forecast is going to be hot, there's a strategy behind our irrigation as well. And amazingly, you know, the fruit stays vibrant and fresh, and the vine health looks fantastic. Now, in a system like this, you're going to lose, we call them the sacrificial vines, you know, the ones on the outer edge. When I had mentioned earlier about 40-mile-an-hour gusts and it's 100 degrees, well, it doesn't matter how you train or plant or develop or design, those things are going to take some abuse. But if it's just those outermost vines, and then you've protected everything else inside of it, that's a success.
They've done their job.
Absolutely. And so that's what we're looking, you know, ahead to the future. If we are developing south aspect stuff, there's tricks that we have up our sleeve. And as Cam mentioned, I mean, the whole north aspect is one of the special things about WeatherEye, that especially when we increase the vine density on that north aspect at higher elevation. I mean, that's kind of a cool recipe for dealing with these hotter vintages.
Cool. Thanks. Before we move on to the Grenache, there's 2 other questions. Greg wants to know about the ideal serving temperature for VO. Chris, what's your thoughts on that? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, we had some noise going on outside. Yeah, about, you know, I like cellar temperature, 52, 55 degrees.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If you have it in the fridge, just let it warm up, you know, a little bit beforehand.
Great. And then Eric, I'm gonna circle back to your question a little bit later, sort of new special projects, new bottling for us. So I'm gonna circle back to that. But let's get to the Grenache. This is pretty cool Grenache, Chris. I gotta say, it's some of the most feral I think I've tasted from us. It's pretty beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, from the first year of the Grenache, is just like, I think everything kind of, or we had high expectations of this project, even going in blind, going in, not, you know, tasting any fruit from it, and designing all this, you know, most everything exceeded our lofty expectations, but I think the Grenache did the most. I think this is just a singular wine. I think it's like 0.8 or 0.9 acres. And it's at the very top of the high canyon. And as that canyon goes up and around, it kind of, it curves slightly up, kind of like a staircase with Syrah on the bottom, and then Roussanne and Viognier. And then at the top is they call it the amphitheater block. It's like, it kind of faces all aspects of south, you know, south and southeast and southwest. And it's just been a revelation. It's all, goblet trained, pretty low to the ground, and more color than you could reasonably expect from a Grenache. And when we talk about Chateauneuf du Pape and those blends, they're made as blends because Grenache historically doesn't carry a whole wine as well as like the blend. And we have the blend, and we'll try it. But in certain places in Chateauneuf, and only the very special places, they do that. And I think this is one of those places where you have a complete wine. This is just 100% from this block.
Yeah, I would agree, Chris. And I would also say, what I'm most struck by in the Grenache, and it's true across the Rhone Reds that we have here, is Ryan talking with him about this project over the years. I mean, ripeness is not an issue for us in Washington, right? Like, we can get our fruit ripe, but it's making sure that we still preserve like both good freshness and good non-fruit characteristics in there. And particularly for Grenache, I think for those of us that love the variety, that's where a lot of the real compellingness of that variety comes from. And we see that here. There's wonderful floral notes and peppery notes in addition to the fruit that we're used to getting from this variety, and terrific intensity as well. So I see it as another example that what the goals that Ryan set out to achieve and Cam set out to achieve with this vineyard and the way that it's planted are being achieved here.
Cool. Cam, Brian, any thoughts on the Grenache before we move on to the High Canyon Syrah?
I love this wine. I love what Chris does with this wine every year, but I think it gets better and better every year, and this is a great example of that. When we did our first plantings of WeatherEye, Grenache was 40% of those plantings, and there were people who said, "You're crazy." But this is the kind of crazy we want to be.
Yeah, they weren't wrong, but the wine is great.
Well, come on now, you're getting a whole seminar on Grenache and Walla Walla coming up, so something's going right.
Absolutely. But bravo. And I'm going to take a second here because I know people probably know the story, but it is amazing that Marty and Chris came to us. They toured the vineyard. They said, "Okay, we're super impressed," or "really interesting," something like that. And then they said, "We're going to come back to you in 90 days with a proposal." Like, okay, what does that mean? But they did come back, and they signed on in a major way. Our largest customer, without question. And you've just done such a tremendous amount for us in putting us on the map, and you've made such great wine. So I want to, anybody from WeatherEye has to thank the folks from Liminal for your very early and staunch commitment. It means a lot, and it's just a super impressive set of wines.
Thanks. Thank you, Cam.
Yeah, thank you.
And Sue Ann Alexander Sean wants to do a Grenache challenge next year, so you're on the hook for that.
Yeah. All right. Noted.
Cool. Let's go on to the Syrah. I just finally had my first chance to try this, and I'm just kind of like going, holy moly. This is a big wine. This is amazing. Chris, your thoughts on this wine?
Yeah, just it was impressive in the barrel kind of the whole time. And then we got it in the bottling tank. So we rack this post ML to get it off the kind of the big lees, all those heavy yeast cells and everything that is there during the fermentation. And, but after that, we don't move it. We just top it up, monitor it, but we don't move it until it goes in a bottling tank. So it's hard to just, like this barrel's good, everything should be good. And I put it together and it was just like, holy cow, this is amazing. And I think it's still got its best to come. But this was, fermented in concrete tank with 3% Viognier, hand punched down. I believe we did some foot stomp, clusters in there. And I think it's just one of those wines that really speaks to the place. As I said, we've You know, the Grenache, I don't think I mentioned, I mean, there's not very much. It goes into one 500-liter barrel and then one, you know, which is over double the size of the other barrels. And maybe we have one extra barrel after that. This is in a big puncheon, 500-liter puncheon and 2 barrels, one of which is new. And it's just one of those where I think the low yield and the really warm summer Syrah kind of really takes that heat well. And you know, I think as with a lot of these wines, I think, you know, we're only getting better at this.
Cool. Sean, any thoughts on this particular?
Yeah,
To me,
you know,
it's like, oh man, got
Yeah, I
mouth covering stuff.
you know,
Anyway,
what I think about when I think about the wines from WeatherEye and specifically the liminal wines is how there's this real intensity of fruit flavor and this concentration with them. And again, we can get ripeness in Washington. That's pretty easily done, but preserving a sense of liveliness and freshness. And when I think back to tasting those first 2018 wines, which was a warm vintage, and 21 was a lot warmer, right? But across my notes, there was still like, there's a sense of freshness to these wines, even with that ripeness and richness. And when you look at 21, hottest vintage on record in Washington with a record low crop, and yet we still have, again, those non-fruit characteristics that you look for in top quality wines, and concentration and freshness to it. And that's just very, very hard to achieve.
nice work. Yeah, this is, you know, Cam, you talked about how this wine you like because it's more approachable early on, but I think this is the wine that's going to have a long life ahead. It's got structure and it's got the tannins.
Agreed. This is candy for adults right here. This is this is amazing. I love it.
Cool. Couple questions on the drinking window for both of these wines. For the Grenache and the Syrah. Chris, any thoughts on that as we move on to the last of the wines we're going to try today?
Yeah, that'll be an interesting question. You know, it's always a guess when we've only been making it for a few years, but I think Washington wines in general, you know, seriously made Washington wines in general have a long life, and these, of course, have even more structure and stuffing than a lot of wines. I think, you know, I've always kind of heard the general wisdom on Rhone varieties is you don't really need to age. You're not gaining a lot by aging them past, I don't know, 8 or 10 years. But they're certainly not going to fall off a cliff. And I think they'd still be interesting for a long time, especially the Syrah. But, you know, Sean has a lot of experience with kind of aged Washington wines too. I'd be curious. It really, the aging question is always just a really tough question for me because it depends on so much, and most of all depends on how you like your wines. Washington wines these are delicious right now. If I was going to drink them right now, I would definitely decant them. But even 2 or 3 years is going to make a huge difference, I think.
Yeah, overall, I think that, you know, what we are able to enjoy in Washington is that we get the best of both worlds, where we have really good immediate drinking pleasure from our wines mixed with really profound, in some cases, longevity. And recently I've been tasting a variety of older Syrahs going back to the mid 90s, early 2000s, mid to late 2000s. And I've been really impressed at how well the wines have been holding up. And I think, you know, Chris talks about structure and the stuffing of the wine, and we get a lot of that, and WeatherEye gets more of that there. And so, you know, I tend to like to drink these wines in the 8 to 12 year. I'm talking Rhone varieties in Washington generally, and it makes me wonder if maybe I should try extending that out, because certainly tasting some of the older wines, specifically some from McRae cellars and others, I've been really impressed at their overall ageability.
Cool.
I try and drink Washington Rhones at an age of 12 to 15, personally. And, you know, I don't find any where I'm, you know, where I'm disappointed that I waited so long.
Yeah. Cool. Let's talk about this last wine. Chris, we've been calling this a GSM for the previous 3 vintages, but we decided, you know, and the marketing jerk that works for the company, I think his name's Marty, decided that, you know, GSM just didn't really tell the story of this wine from a name standpoint. So I set you off in a corner with some psilocybin mushrooms and said, why don't you come up with some more interesting ways of expressing kind of how we should tell the story of these wines. So we call this thing now the Barbarous Heart. What is the deal with that name?
Well, I thought, as I think about, and there were no psilocybin mushrooms involved, it's just deep contemplation.
Oh, okay.
One thing I liked, it's been fun with Liminal to kind of, you know, with the tasting notes and a lot of the, you know, the graphics and stuff. We're trying to be more modern, whereas the Benny is kind of more, classic French sort of thing. And so I thought this was an opportunity to kind of make a little more interesting or evocative names. And I kind of always think of Rhone wines in southern France as kind of having this wild heart, so to speak, and Bordeaux wines kind of having more references to structure and strength and that kind of thing, and maybe order. So Apollonian, Dionysian, so to speak. And so I named this one Barbarous Heart because that's just this. It's kind of this. You know, I think just a lot of passion goes into growing the wine and making it, and it kind of comes from a wild place. It may or may not have oblique references to the grower, but I just think it's evocative of, you know, we don't have to be really just literal with this wine. You know, liminal is kind of this idea of this liminal space where, you know, ideas develop. So so in the Bordeaux, we're kind of foreshadowing Eric's question. There'll be a Bordeaux blend analogous to this.
Yeah. So talk about the wine a little bit now, Chris. You've explained that we named it after Ryan Johnson in an oblique way.
So we made this wine from the beginning, and the idea is, you know, whereas the High Canyon wines are all just based on that one stretch, that relatively small stretch of vineyard on the Red Mountain side, we still get Grenache from other sites, and we get a small block of more Ved that is kind of on the north side, not far from the Grenache, and then the Syrah does come from the canyon. So that, you know, the idea is that we can from those make just a really cohesive wine, kind of, you know, inspired by the wines of Chatonistic Pop, especially that, you know, that Ryan and I both really enjoy, and because, you know, even though we make the single block Grenache from the High Canyon, all the Grenache is great up there, and we've been actually moving around blocks trying to find the perfect one. So the idea here is that harmony. This is one that, you know, when we went to make the blend, we got all the wine, since most of it was already in 500-liter puncheons. Also, there was some in concrete egg, aging there after, you know, after it's fermented, and it gets racked into there for part of the year. And I just think the texture, we found that the more large format we use, the more we like it. So we're increasing that. In Rhones, so the 500-liter puncheons, most barrels are 225-liter. So other than that, no new oak, really just trying to express this incredible fruit. It's all native yeast fermented. It is almost, I think it's mostly fermented in concrete with a little bit of steel. I think the more Ved, again, we didn't get enough. We've remedied that again with the 2022, so look forward to even more of that in 2022. But yeah, this is kind of our foray into the public. A lot of these are just going to be for club members and people who get the allocation, I think they'll sell out quickly. This is one we can make a little more of and featured on a few high-end restaurant lists. And
Yeah,
and
I know. The Metropolitan Grill is featuring this wine by Glasspour right now, which is kind of exciting. So if you're in there and you're sitting at the bar and you've got a hamburger and you want a good GSM, a glass of this. So it's it's a wine that's Metropolitan Grill, Met Grill downtown.
Great, thank you.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so those are the 4 wines we're going to release. I don't know. I guess any other thoughts on the GSM or on the Barbarous Heart, Ryan? I've got you down for 17 cases. We hope you got room in your garage.
Well, if there is any reference to the grower, I would have expected it to be kind of dumb and clumsy, but it's neither of those, and it really has captured my attention. Chris had poured a little sneak peek for me of this, and I was just blown away. I think every year that we work together, the quality is getting better and better as we understand the site. And geez Louise, I mean, I think you guys really killed it with this, and I appreciate the reference.
Any thoughts on this one, Sean? I don't know if I had a chance to hear what you.
Yeah, I would say, we've talked about the kind of surprise of the white wines and the Viognier showing well, and how superlative Grenache has been at WeatherEye, and the potential for Syrah. But even at a higher production, albeit still very modest 182 cases, I think the GSM blends these past series of years since this project started have always really caught my attention, just for showcasing the 3 varieties really well. There's a great delineation and you can see them all there, but they're also melded beautifully together. I love this wine. I think it's and also makes me think about the potential for more VED at WeatherEye as well.
Yeah, the Mourvedre site is really cool. It's just that little bit north facing, and it's usually the last thing picked on the entire vineyard, I think. So he's kind of saying, hey, I'm ready to be done for the year. Are we ready to pick this? But it's pretty special. And this isn't, these are blocks that don't go into our other wines, but we do, we do make a specific blend through blending trials to really get that balance between the 3 and really find that synergy of fruit, and then we can declassify a little bit too.
Cool. Well, with that going on, I thought we maybe spend a few minutes to talk about what's coming up, because the emails and the offerings are going out later this week. So Allison, you want to switch to kind of what we're changing about our allocation process? I mean, if you remember last year, we kind of put all the wines out at once, and I think that kind of overwhelmed our customers and kind of presented a lot of confusing options. So we're going back to a twice-a-year allocation process. We're not kind of working with no standing orders per se, but if you've purchased the wines in the past, you will have first priority to purchase these wines going forward. We're also not doing a really hardcore limitation on allocations, and the allocations are in some ways not really guaranteed. And so basically first come, first serve. So Allison, you want to show us what that looks like? If you'd like to order more than you're allocated, you can always request additional bottles using the wish list. I think we're doing 6 bottle allocations on the High Canyon and a 12 bottle allocation initially on the GSM. But we will fulfill wish list requests as they come in. So let's take a look at the timing on all this. Oh yeah, also tasting experiences. In the past, we've done these big events to do these releases, and we've really moved away from that. We don't think that gives people the opportunity to really come in and have a personalized experience, be able to taste the wines. So we're doing prepaid reservations that are refunded if you purchase your current allocation. And these are, a nice curated tours of production facility, a guided tasting. There'll be accompanying bites. And we're going to be starting to do these on Fridays and Saturdays, 3 different time periods, until the wine, as long as the wines last, as long as we have wines to sell. And so The featured wines for the fall are the 3 High Canyon wines. The initial allocation is 6 bottles each, but like I said, the wish list is an opportunity for you to purchase more if you're so inclined. And then we're offering a full 12 case allocation of the Barber's Heart to start with. The tastings will be in Woodinville at the production facility. That's where you can tour the actual production. We've got a dedicated space where we make the liminal wines, and it's really a cool operation there. So we're excited to show that off. And in the fall, you're going to be right in the middle of production, so you'll be able to experience what's going on in actual tasting and the actual winery. And so initially, starting this Thursday, we will have an allocation period that's open to everybody who previously purchased the wine until September 30th. And then on 10/2, the remaining inventory and the magnums will be available to all list members. And then we will also begin shipping that week for people who are shipping customers. And the tasting room will be open that Friday and Saturdays through the fall. The reservations for tasting experiences goes live on the 1st of September. And like we mentioned above, the tastings will start on 10/6. Of course, we're always available for pickup. Mostly we're trying to manage our pickups on these tasting weekends. So you can come by, you don't have to do a tasting to pick up your wines. But we have a good team of people who can communicate with you on picking up your wines as soon as they become available. So that's the fall allocation strategy. For the spring, we're gonna move to kind of the block highlight series, which is the block 16 Syrah and the block 47 Cabernet. And Eric, you asked a question earlier about what's next for Avinia, what special projects. I think we are exploring the idea of doing a white wine, but we are for sure, we've bottled a Bordeaux style blend. And Chris, do you want to talk about a little bit about what that is going to be?
Yeah, in the past couple, just 2019 and 2020, we did a Cabernet Franc, 100% Cabernet Franc, which is, it's really outstanding fruit. But as we thought going forward, we also have been getting just a little bit of Merlot, and there's a nice block of Cab on the north side as well. So I thought it would be, we think it'll be more sustainable, more consistently just kind of sustainable going forward to make this Bordeaux blend. The first year, it's actually a little bit Cabernet Franc dominant. It could change a little bit from year to year, but it's really just designed to show that, show the quality of the vineyard and really find a really balanced Bordeaux blend, but still with a lot of intensity. Yeah. It's a really cool wine.
And so we'll be offering allocations for those starting in February. And then, and so same sort of strategy, 6 weeks for previous purchasers. Reservations go live March, and then we'll be doing tastings on those wines through April into the summer. So that's our new strategy on the allocations. We're really excited about that. I think that'll give people a chance to visit the winery a couple times a year, see what's going on, and kind of acquire the quantities of wines they're interested in. It is moving away from a guaranteed allocation to a first come, first serve. I think if you're a previous purchaser, you don't have to worry, I think, too much about not getting the wines you want, but we do encourage you to act soon. And we're super excited about the wines. And so with that being said, I think we covered all the questions. Is there a Mourvèdre, only wine in our future? I don't know. That's something that we talked about. Cam Myhrvold would love us to make a Mourvèdre, but I can see the WeatherEye guys are making their own Mourvèdre, so maybe we don't need to make one anymore. I'll put my winemaker against their winemaker any day.
It's just all amazing fruit, and you're just like, you want to make it all. And it's just, I think at some point, try to stay focused and keep it more streamlined for you guys, the customers too. And
I love that idea, Chris.
Well, I don't think it'll hurt our position in the vineyard if we don't do it. Maybe we'll think about it. But I am intrigued by the idea of a white wine.
Yeah.
We've been using it's the only place where we use any of the WeatherEye fruit is in our La Pearl white wine. And I think that's the Roussanne. Tucson, and it's a beautiful wine that maybe there's an opportunity for us to go a little deeper with WeatherEye down the road. Very cool. Well, we're kind of 11 minutes past what I thought. We've got some great questions. I got one more that popped up here. See if I can address that. That's just a nice thank you. We appreciate it. Look for emails this week. Sean, thank you so much for participating in our little event this year. And Cam
Thank
and
you for having
Ryan,
me.
we'll see you guys in the fields, I'm sure, soon. And as always, Mr. Peterson, it's a pleasure working with you.
You as well, and Cam and Ryan too. And thank you, Sean, for taking time out to talk about our project here. We're certainly excited about it and really excited for the future of it too. I think we're only, as we've talked about through this, I think we just keep kind of dialing it in more.
Yeah, hats off to all of you. Really, really exciting wines.
Terrific. All right, I'll let it go. Thank you. And have a great evening. I'm going to go try to get cool here in Bend, Oregon. I don't know where, but I'm going to give it a. All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Here's everyone.